Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of The Hunt. We're here on what is probably the dreariest, most disgusting day of the year in the Northeast for those of you in the greater New York area. But we're still back with another episode and bringing a great energy. So for those tuning in for the first time, I am Kevin Roth, Director of Recruiting at Advice Personnel, a full-service recruiting agency serving the New York area. And today with me is a repeat host and guest, George Parkhurst, star recruiter, accounting aficionado, passionate tennis player, movie buff, political activist. I mean, the list for a while, but I'll let you step in. Thanks for coming on, George.
Yeah, what an intro. Even better than the first one that I went on. So thanks for having me, Kevin. It's a dreary day. It's not missing us here in Pennsylvania, but pleasure to be doing this with you.
Yeah, I'm getting better on the intros. I've been practicing, and I think when you came on, it was at the beginning before I really got into the swing of things. And
yeah, you missed a few things.
Yeah, from the fan mail that I've been receiving, it seems like I'm making progress, but I still get some letters with constructive criticism. So, by the way, before we get into the show, how did you enjoy hosting duties a few weeks ago? I was very impressed. I thought I was going to be out of a job.
Yeah, I think anybody who's a guest and finds it to be easy and then goes in hosting duties, whatever podcast you go on or video podcast you do, you recognize how challenging it could be and how you're trying to, get cadence and all these certain things. So, I respect you even more knowing how it goes.
Well, thank you. And so hello to all the viewers today. And for those that haven't watched, essentially this show, we're all in the recruiting industry. So this show is meant to provide a lot of insight, guidance, and advice around everyday issues that you face, whether you're searching for a job or looking to hire talent. And the real beauty of this forum is it's meant to be interactive. So you can use the comment box throughout the show. We love to hear where you're from. I see a repeat guest, Jenna Fox, who always tunes in from Brooklyn, but we'll probably have some additional guests throughout the show. Let us know where you're watching from. But more importantly, if you have questions, comments, thoughts, things we're talking about that are specific to your situation, throw those in the comment box throughout the show, and we'd love to get to them. And hopefully the insight we share is going to be relevant to you the next time you have a conversation with your company or with your boss or making a job change. All right. So with that said, today's topic is one that we hear a lot. I mean, this is one of those words that as a recruiter, it makes you cringe. And I thought today would be a great opportunity to have George on to speak to people about the definition behind this word and how to really evaluate it properly to ensure that you're not passing up on opportunities that could otherwise be fantastic. So as we get rolling here, I just want to say we got a few first-time viewers. Sally, thanks for tuning in. Carrie, welcome from New Jersey. Probably very rainy over there. So it looks like we got a good group going on a Thursday afternoon. Nothing better to watch on TV. Might as well watch us.
Yeah.
All right. So with that said, George, I wanted to talk today, as we spoke about a lateral move. And we hear that term lateral, and it comes up a lot in our industry when people are looking for a job. And they're hesitant to make what is so-called a lateral move. So I thought we'd start today, for the people that aren't really familiar with that term or have used it a little more loosely, for the audience watching, how would you describe to them your definition of what a lateral move is?
Yeah, I think it's great to create some clarity on this, but a lateral move really means changing roles into a position that may have similar responsibilities, a similar salary, or a similar job title. So we'll break down those three, but that's how I would define it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the term lateral, when you think of a football play or whatever, it's sideways or even backwards. So people use that term as a defining characteristic that they're making a move that is taking them sideways in their career based on a few evaluating factors. So that being said, I mean, that seems like something that could be a pretty important factor. If you do really find a lateral move, does it really make sense to make that change? So thinking about that, when are you usually hearing that first come up in the process? Like at what point are people realizing that this move may in fact be lateral in nature?
Yeah, the objection is common early on in the process when speaking with candidates. I think when I'm only providing a real skeleton of what the role is, maybe I provide a job title, maybe I provide a understanding of market range for this role, or just giving them a bullet by bullet of what the responsibilities are, they may push back and say, hey, I've done this before, I make this, or this is my job title. Why would I move to, decide into something that I'm already doing?
So it comes up like first conversation, you're already getting told after a brief intro?
First conversation, or even just through, the texting or any way that we connect with these candidates, when I'm providing them a role and seeing if they're interested, I may get that. So it's not just on a phone call. It's also getting an email back that says, hey, not interested in this. I'm looking for, a different kind of job title.
Yeah, see, that's crazy to me because that's the equivalent of, I've had clients where, presented a great candidate, or a client sees a background on paper and says, yeah, the experience looks good, but, I really need more of a strong manager. And if you relay that to a candidate before they even had a chance to meet the person, those of you watching, what would your reaction be if you sent your resume before even speaking to the company and they said, no, it looks like, they wouldn't bring more of the managerial skill set that we need that's going to really be able to manage our team? You'd be pretty taken aback. Like, how could they possibly make that assumption on such a surface level thing like a resume? And I think the same thing holds true when you're making that judgment call that early on.
Absolutely. There's so much involved with understanding if a role is right for you, that just taking it based on how I described it as like the skeleton of what the job seems to be is not going to give you the best information in deciding, is this really a lateral move, or is this something that, that is really exciting to me?
Yeah, skeleton's a great word for it. I think also very appropriate, being that we're a few days away from Halloween. So working that in, that was very well done, George.
I didn't even mean to do that. I pulled that off.
Yeah, that's impressive. So that being said, let's break this down for everyone watching. Because a lot of it's gut instinct, right? You hear about a job, it has a certain characteristic, sounds very similar. You know what? It's probably not enough different. So let's help the people out there who are watching understand, is this move really lateral? And I want to touch on 3 of the characteristics that you brought up at the beginning. We'll break each down. So first, I think the easiest thing for someone to assume when they see a job spec or they hear a role, you reach out to someone, you send them an email via LinkedIn, right? And you say, I have a great senior accountant role with a growing company. And they sit there and the first thing they read is senior accountant. They're a senior accountant. Why would I take a lateral move? I'm already a senior accountant. I'm not going to move and uproot myself to go into another senior accountant role. So if that's the case, why would I possibly move for the same exact title?
Yeah, and thanks for keeping it in my world of the accountant world. So there's a lot of things to think about outside of just the job title. I think number 1 would be the organizational structure, right? And the reporting structure. If you're in a really bloated organization and you've got 3 managers between you and a controller of the accounting org, that's a lot different than being in an organization where you're reporting directly to a controller as a senior accountant, just in terms of visibility to leadership, and just getting at least that kind of visibility so you can take on other roles and have a larger scope. So reporting structure is one thing. I think also scope of the business, right? So if you're in a $30 million business as a senior accountant, and this role that I'm presenting to you is a $500 million business, $500 million businesses have a lot more complexities than a $30 million business, whether it be external stakeholders, various different business lines, just a lot of moving parts cross-functionally, in operations that are just larger. So the title itself, there's a lot of factors to think about outside of just the title, and what kind of value are you creating for your company? And your value can be much different in a senior accountant in one role versus a senior accountant in another role.
Yeah, so touching on that point, a lot of people, the lateral move, just to throw a little curveball and challenge you a little bit, is what about, how it looks on my resume, right? I'm a senior accountant now. I'm making a move. I'm going to be a senior accountant at this new place. Are people going to then think, I'm not progressive as I move along in my career? Because a lot of people are worried about what that LinkedIn profile is going to look like.
Yeah, it goes back to thinking about why you're making a move in the first place. Does it have something to do with upward mobility or growth? Have you been repeating processes over again? If you look at the next role as a better opportunity to prove yourself and be promoted early on, then you're going to have a better opportunity to get that title that you want down the road than in this current opportunity. So I think it's very dependent on the company and the person. But I think you need to be in a role where you feel like you can grow and advance. And if it's not this role, then maybe it's something else.
Yeah. All right. So fair enough. So the first thing we talk about is title, right? And you break that down. There are so many layers to title. Using that as a judgment characteristic is the most short-sighted of anything. I can't tell you the stories of where these titles come from and how they mean different things at different companies, to the extent that I even have clients call me to think, what should I call this person? Because I want to draw somebody in and attract them. And the titles that come up, it's so different between companies. So you got to see through that and really understand more about the role. Second thing, and always a sensitive subject, All right, George. So you reach out to me in that same token. You got me on the phone now. You got me very interested. You broke me down over that senior accountant thing. I'm past that now. But now I ask you what the job's paying, and I'm making around $100,000 right now. And I ask you what this job's paying, and you tell me it's going to be paying around $100,000. All right, so you got me past the title one, but you're not getting me past. I'm not making a lateral move for money. I'm changing jobs. You're going to tell me I'm supposed to make a move for the same money?
Right. Yeah, and it is a very personal conversation, the salary conversation, in terms of what your living standards are. There are a lot of situations that we as recruiters can evaluate, ourselves, that really the applicant has to evaluate. Meaning that there is a lot more other than base salary, I think, associated with an overall compensation package or other perks. Maybe it's not part of a full compensation package, but let's just go through a couple, right? Number one, a lot of the private equity-backed companies we work with, there's an equity component of that, which is really cool. So, you feel like you're really growing with the business. If the business ends up popping, they decide to go public, those shares can be worth something. Also, in terms of, even, review cycles, right? Shorter review cycles. If you get into a situation where you get to move into a role where, you're going to be evaluated early, like quickly in shorter review cycles, that could give you an opportunity to fight more for a higher salary that you want. So I think also, the review process is good too, but some of the bread and butters I think are going to be even the work from home and work-life balance. I think that's a big part. Health insurance is so core to everybody, right? We work with some companies that, have really great insurance benefits, even for an individual and their family. Outside of that, obviously, whether you're young or old, everyone wants to start investing in a 401k and they want to be involved in that. So that's a piece of it too. So many others, but just to name a few, I think those are some good ones to look at outside of just that base comp.
Yeah, and just not really challenge anybody out there who's sitting there thinking we're crazy. You heard all the time, you read these books, you hear online, you hear from your recruiter, never take a job at the same money. You should always get a raise. Well, think about it realistically. If you're making the same money, but at least right now, in this point in time, but this position is going to give you greater exposure, greater experience, greater skills, different tools to build upon, then the inherent value of that salary becomes greater. So yes, your paycheck won't be different each week, but the tools you're developing inherently make that each of those paychecks equate to that much more. And I know that sounds like a semantics kind of argument, or like I sound ignorant to an extent, but it's true. If you have a mortgage right now, okay, if you own your home versus renting, and I have friends that rent, and they think I'm crazy because I pay whatever, $2,000 a month towards my mortgage. They're paying $2,000 a month towards renting, and they have the mobility to move around and do stuff. So we're both technically losing $2,000 out of our bank accounts each month. The difference is years from now, I'm going to own my home. I'm going to have invested that in something. The same way you're investing in your career, even if your salary might be staying the same. So yeah, I would always advocate to get more money when you can. Like you said, break down all the factors. But at the end of the day, even if you're making the same money, but it solves a problem, gets you to a better spot, better skills, better strengths, better tools to develop, then it's not a lateral move by definition.
Yeah, it's equity in yourself, that you're trying to build up. And I also think it's important to understand what are some things that you want to gain from the opportunity that is actually going to provide you that value. We talk about public accountants who want to get that private exposure, get more of an operational understanding of a business as opposed to, a high level understanding of financials and big picture things. So yeah, everybody's trying to put more, is trying to create more value or do things that provide more value to organizations. So I think that's it's kind of a holistic argument. It's hard to come to grips with sometimes when you just think about the 2-week paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So for everybody watching, we're talking about breaking down the stigma associated with a lateral move and really challenging you to think outside the box of if this is really lateral, because if you make the mistake of using that term too quickly, I promise you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities that can actually be extremely progressive. And 5 years from now, you would have been in an amazing spot if that trajectory were the same. So we talked about salary, we talked about title and how to not view those. The last one, and again, if you're watching and you're facing this, or you're struggling with a certain opportunity, you have an offer right now and you're battling with it, throw your comments into the comment box while we're live. Let us help you. Let us really guide you through this stuff. The last one I'd say, and this one takes a little deeper of a dive, is the scope of the role, right? So you talk through someone with what they're doing now, right? We want to use an accounting example. You're doing some of the accounts payable, accounts receivable, some of the general ledger work, very basic day-to-day accounting. This role, as you hear about the description of it, highlights a lot of the same things. All right, so George, same conversation. All right, you're doing a great job. You're wearing me down, man. You got me over the hump on title. You got me over the hump on salary, but now I learn a little bit more about the role, and it sounds very similar to what I'm doing now. So why am I going to change jobs to do something right now that sounds similar to what I'm already doing?
I use this phrase a lot when I'm speaking to candidates, and I like to say you want to leverage the experience you have to get the experience you want. And I think that's the best way to kind of create value for yourself is to use the experiences you've had and be able to move into something that sounds a little bit more interesting to you. And I love this conversation because I ask everybody, and everybody kind of, not many people think through it, but industry, right? Industry is a huge topic right now, especially as we look at COVID and its impact on a variety of different industries, right? Downward impact on the retail and hospitality space, on the real estate space. And we work with a lot of our tech partners, and we see that a lot of these technology companies are actually beating out their brick and mortar competitors. I won't get too deep into it, but people have interests in certain industries outside of their just professional interests. Maybe you really like the retail space or the fashion space, or you're kind of a tech guy, right? But you're in accounting. Leverage the experience you have to move into a role in an industry that is exciting to you, where you can get that industry exposure and then be able to migrate into something that might have a greater scale. I also think, I mentioned this on the, from the beginning about a growing business versus a stagnant business. And in a stagnant business, if you're doing those same responsibilities, that's rolling over, processes are rolling over month over month, year over year, you are doing the same thing. If you're in a growing business, a business like a startup, something that's hyper growth, and they need somebody with your expertise, you're really in this a very cool, privileged position to be able to move in and be able to create and build on the things that you are bringing from your other company, and being able to really start these processes. And with a growing business, there's always some accounting implication with every kind of business implication. So when I think about it, whenever a business is growing, there's going to be new things and new opportunities to take on. So the company and the industry, I think, are really important in this, and that's kind of my spiel. But I think that's the nuance, right? The scope of the role is one thing, but the kind of business you're operating in and your interest in that business is just as important.
All right, you know what? I'm sold. You could send my resume to this place. I'll interview based on that factor. But in a serious set, the word lateral is really meant to describe sideways in every aspect. So you got to really ask yourself before you use that term, is anything different? All right, title's the same. Okay, salary's the same. Okay, scope of the role might be similar. What about industry? What about software I'm going to get exposure to? We talk about NetSuite being a huge platform in our world in accounting and finance these days, to the point where companies only want to see people that have that. So is it potentially worth taking a lateral move in title, salary, and scope if you're going to get the NetSuite experience that's going to then open up all these other doors for you? I could make the argument that it might be. So you have to really think outside the box. And before you use that term lateral, don't think where it puts you literally tomorrow in comparison to where you are now, but where is it going to put you in terms of the doors it's going to open for you 3 years from now versus if you stayed where you are. And that's where the separation is going to really take place. Absolutely. And you always say that with, you made that, great comparison with like marathon runners, right? You talk about, how certain marathon runners pace themselves so they can end up emerging in front at the end, as opposed to those that, are really looking to, go for it. And I'm not a runner, so my language here is not great, but those who take that initial sprint and then they run out of gas at the end. It is similar to that. You need to make really smart decisions, especially early on in your career. And that might mean taking roles that may seem lateral to you, but may bring a lot more to the table and provide value for you long term. Yeah, and that's the time to do it when you're early in your career. Those of you watching, you're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years into your career. Now's the time to be open to that, and you should be open to it even down the road if it really adds value in some way. And again, that means it's not lateral if it does. If some aspect of it's different, then lateral doesn't apply by definition. But that time early in your career, you're not going to want to do that when you're 30 years into your career. At that point, you only want to move if something really makes sense on a bunch of fronts. But early in your career, if it's going to give you something that's going to set you up 5 to 10 years from now, then it's not a lateral move. It's actually a progressive move and one that sets you up in a much better light. So when you're thinking about title, when you're thinking about salary, and when you're thinking about scope of the role, tune in to what George shared and what we shed light on today, and hopefully that'll help guide you through. And with that said, I want to save time for a few questions to get through before we wrap up for today and let everybody go enjoy their Halloween weekend. Hopefully everyone has some good plans and staying safe. But we had one question come in, George, that is not necessarily related. She's open to a lateral move, which is great. Alice, I think that's smart and wise to do. But George, Alice asks that she's an executive assistant laid off on September 11th and had her resume redone. She has no problem with a lateral move, but wants to know just how bad is this job market for executive assistants?
So as I kind of scour through LinkedIn, and I was working with an executive assistant yesterday, there is a lot of opportunities out there, but I think that's it would be best served if we had a conversation over the phone on something like this. I think just to get a better understanding of kind of how her search strategy has been, or maybe what certain struggles that you might have had over the last few weeks. So I'm happy to have a conversation with you, Alice, and I appreciate the question.
Yeah, and that's an awesome response. And I think, Alice, to tie that back into our topic, executive assistant is a perfect example of a role that can seem very lateral on the surface. There's really, aside from executive assistant, senior executive assistant. So many of the same titles on the surface will seem the same, and so many salaries will seem comparable from one EA role to another. The difference is going to be who's the person you're supporting. What's he going to get you involved in, or she's going to get you involved in? Maybe he or she, at your past boss, only wanted you to handle like travel and stuff. This person actually wants you to sit in on meetings, be their eyes and ears when they're not around. So perfect example of our topic today in an executive assistant kind of role. We have a few other quick questions, and some of these, George, will be better suited, like you said, to an offline conversation, not necessarily exactly on topic. But Femi asks, they're currently doing data analysis in some AR, but still have recruiters reaching out for AP positions. They had that role many years ago, so recruiters are probably looking a little further back. What's the polite way to respond to these recruiters when approached, if they keep getting approached about these AP roles?
Yeah, I think I think it would be worthwhile to have the conversation with the recruiter and say, I know I have this kind of in my background. You obviously work a lot of times, accounting recruiters happen to work in the finance space as well. So, I think that individual recruiter can maybe shed light on, where you are right now, where maybe your strengths might be. And if you are doing a lot of financial data analysis in this position right now, try to share that with them and say, I've really been working on these things, and maybe even come up with concrete details. Like, I've looked at these certain roles that are financial analysis roles. I've gotten to do A, B, C, and D, which is kind of required on the spec. So, I think I could be better suited for a financial analyst role, but, start the conversation with them on, why they feel that way. Because if you can get the basis of reason as to why that person sent it to you, you might get a reasoning as to why everybody's sending it to you. Maybe it's the way your background is set up on LinkedIn. There's a lot of factors.
Yeah, it's a great point. And the LinkedIn, the way your background's set up, I was going to bring that point up, or your resume, Femi. What you should do, bury that AP experience. If you're really focused on data analysis and AR, and that's where you want to stay, beef up that resume. You don't want to mislead. You still want to have that AP stuff on there, but that should be such a slim portion. That entire first page, or at first glance, anyone's eyes that's viewing that should only see data analysis and AR. Bury that AP stuff, and that should get you more the type of attention. I have to see your resume to really give you the right guidance, or share it with George after this conversation. Get on, connect with him on LinkedIn, send him your resume, and he'll give you some good guidance. All right, last topic, we'll wrap up for the day, is from Carrie. Carrie has a great question. Again, a little bit off the specific topic, but a very, very important question. Carrie is covered by his wife's health insurance, so he doesn't need coverage. Is it fair for him to ask a prospective employer for a bump in the initial salary if he doesn't need to be covered by them? And if so, what percentage of the amount that they would have paid for them is fair to ask? So essentially, for those watching, insurance coverage for an employee can be very, very expensive. And most companies factor that in as a cost of hiring. So when you find out that they don't necessarily need coverage, technically that's more money in the company's pocket and you're a less expensive hire. So is it fair to ask for that back in the form of compensation?
Well, yeah, I think we've dealt with this in the past. We've dealt with people that, hey, I'm paying, I have my company paying for part of my health insurance now. As I move to the next role, are they going to be paying less? And we've been able to navigate these conversations. I think as recruiters, it's our job to really get each person comfortable with where they need to be on a compensation from a compensation standpoint. But you need to evaluate, I think, a few different things. Just like we said, 100K job here is not the same as a 100K job there. Similar with this, like the amount that are you willing in terms of total compensation? Do you like the role enough to take some sort of a total compensation drop or stay the same in total compensation? And you need to evaluate those things. So this is this is not a yes or no thing. I think for me, it's really about, what does this job mean to you? If it's something that's like exactly the same, I'd ask, what's the reason for even looking for that prospective employer? So I think it is an honest conversation to have. But I also think there's a lot of factors involved with total comp.
Yeah, it's a good point. Carrie, we did a Hunt episode on negotiating salary. And in that episode, we talked about making the whole positioning and argument around your total value add. And this topic should be something that's grouped in. I would never recommend that as your sole argument point for getting a higher salary. You should drive this home with a certain percentage increase, because I think it comes across a little bit short-sighted. What I would suggest is grouping that into your total argument. So you found an opportunity you like. Let's say, for argument's sake, they come in at 100,000. You really wanted 105. You don't need benefits. I would bring that into my initial expectation of salary and really have an honest conversation with the company that, is there anything they could do? I would not go in firm and say, listen, you guys are saving money on my benefits, so I'd really like to see that kicked in. But more of a request than an ask. And I'd want to know going into that you're comfortable still taking the salary where it is, but that you're using this just as a feeler, see if there's any wiggle room. You don't need benefits. If that's saving them anything, is there anything they could do, and live with the results? But I would not recommend using that as a hard negotiating point. I think it'll be read the wrong way. Because it's not as if that money's going directly into a company as a profit. It's just allocated elsewhere in their healthcare budget potentially. All right. So with that said, great questions. I love the engagement today. And for anyone that still has questions, I know the show lags a little bit from the time we're actually live. So we'll get to any of those additional comments after the show. George will be commenting throughout the week. Make sure you follow Advice on LinkedIn. We're always putting out content like this to help you with your job search. And make sure you connect with George. He's tagged to this post. Connect with him, send him messages. Happy to help anybody out there, long story short, that's struggling with the job search or looking to hire. Reach out to us. We're all about creating those relationships. And George, man, thank you so much. This was fun today. Thank you so much for joining and being on.
It was fun, and we got great engagement. And I just think there's these are fun conversations, especially for people in our world who love doing what we do. So thanks again.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode of The Hunt. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and most importantly, follow Advice on LinkedIn. Everyone have a great rest of the week. Stay dry. Have an awesome Halloween weekend. Stay safe, and we'll be back next week with a new episode. Thanks so much for watching.